Can you just go blah? This is what I'm thinking, blah 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 blah, or this is how I feel. No, it doesn't. And they start off by saying intimacy is the most risky and most rewarding ways of all in spending time. And how powerful is that, right?
I mean, phew.
You know, to have that in the workplace.
What I like about it is we're coming back to this feeling of okayness.
That's at the heart of intimacy, is freely being able to express our thoughts and feelings. Now, does that mean you can say whatever you want?
And today we're talking about
the capacity for intimacy. Sounds like a rhyme nearly, doesn't it? Capacity for intimacy. Yeah.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to OKEveryday, a podcast about transactional analysis, or TA, and its application. The core belief and basic philosophical position of TA is that I'm okay and you're okay. But we've all experienced times when we felt not okay, when we questioned ourselves, we questioned others in a negative and self-critical kind of way. That limits us from experiencing life to the fullest. That's why myself, Alexi, and Jason, a pro in transactional analysis, will dive into how to make us closer to being and feeling okay every day. Interested? Come join us.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to OKEveryday. Hi, Jason. How's your week been?
Hello. Good. Again, another sunny day. I don't know what it is for you and I when we do these podcasts. It's in the evening and it's still sunny, so that's all good. And you, how's your week?
We're just picking those days. The week was intense. Happy it's the weekend, and I'm happy to be here. That's one thing that I'm really happy for.
Lovely.
And today we got a really interesting session. As we've agreed, we're kind of reverse engineering these podcasts, right? So we're not going from the start to the end. We're actually started a bit with the philosophies, with the principles of TA, and then we're moving to the outcomes. So last time we talked about physis, which again, beautiful Greek word. We unpacked it, and we're going to be continuing to unpack it in the later on episodes. And today we're talking about
the capacity for intimacy. Sounds like a rhyme nearly, doesn't it? Capacity for intimacy. Yeah, it could be. I don't know. I wonder what that sounds like in different languages. Probably lovely.
I know that I say this in different podcasts, but again, it sounds warm. It sounds very kind of very pleasant.
Yeah,
Capacity for
and
intimacy.
I think when we get into it, you'll find out it is. It's actually quite lovely, when you get into it, like when you actually practice it and when you experience it, which, by the way, we all have experienced it, but these are just words that we're going to explore that explains what it is and potentially how to get into it more often, both personally and in work.
Right. Jason, well, first and foremost, we have to start with what is capacity for intimacy? How would you explain it?
It's again, it's one of those concepts in transaction analysis. Now, the word intimacy is used in a particular way in transaction analysis, and you, as you were saying before, Ali, in the previous episodes, TA picks words for specific reasons, but they're specific TA reasons, if that makes sense. So, and when I first started studying it, I realized actually it's super important to get more of this into our lives, and as a result of applying some of the transaction analysis. But it is one of those things that maybe isn't written about a huge amount. It's kind of written about in TA around what happens when we're not getting it, as opposed to what happens when we do get it. So, to honor the writers in transaction analysis, I've got a couple of quotes here which will help us kind of frame it up. And again, the two quotes I'm going to talk to, they slightly contradict each other.
Okay.
That's the lovely part about transaction analysis, is people can drill down about it.
Intriguing.
Yeah. So I'm going to read from two people called Willems and Brown. Stan Willems and Michael Brown, very famous transaction analysis. And they start off by saying intimacy is the most risky and most rewarding ways of all in spending time. So already you can see it's controversial, right? Intimacy involves the sharing of feelings, thoughts, or experiences in a relationship of openness, honesty, and trust. Okay. There is a straight, spontaneous exchange in the here and now with no ulterior motives. So what they're saying is you're very, very present, you're open, you're sharing, and there's no ulterior motives whatsoever. So already it's getting quite interesting, eh?
Mm-hmm.
The intimate experience might be physical or emotional, pleasant or unpleasant. Yeah, that's interesting too. So we might unpack that. Okay. Although intimacy provides the highest reward, people often avoid it because they believe it is too risky and unpredictable. Right? And I'll go on just a little bit more, and then later on I'll talk about the other kind of the other people who wrote about it. So a person who believes that she and others are okay, remember we were talking about I'm okay, you're okay?
Sure.
Will risk being open and intimate in many more circumstances than will the person who doubts his or her or others' okayness. So they're saying the more you're okay and you're showing I'm okay, you're okay, the more likely you are to be open to intimacy, sharing, and receiving.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's a big quote with a lot of things in there. So I'll just frame a few things that popped into my head when you were reading the quote. So intimacy is risky, it's rewarding.
Mm-hmm. That's what they say.
That's what they say. We might experience differently, but that's what is said in that quote. That's true. It provides a feeling of openness, trust, and there's no ulterior motive.
Bingo.
A lot of people are afraid of it because it's risky.
Because they might even think that there is an alternative motive. Ulterior motive
because they might think that there's a game played, right?
Bingo.
Somehow.
Something's going on.
And if you're, so the people there, fair to say that it's a hypothesis that if people are okay, that they're more open to being intimate with other people.
Yes, intimate more often.
Intimate more often.
Yeah, because it's one of those things where it's not about always being intimate, because that's not realistic. That's not going to happen. You know, but it's about actually being able to inspire that either within ourselves or with others more often. And why? Because the reward actually is great.
Right.
It's quite big. Right. So if we boil it down to, if you imagine, let's make this a little bit more simple. Kids, for example, are more likely to show intimacy because they haven't learned about ulterior motives in a very deep way. So they'll laugh more easy. They'll check in with each other more easy. They'll express themselves more easy. They just kind of put it out there. And us grown-ups might think, oh my God, that's you can't do that. That's not appropriate. But actually, it is, because it's spontaneous. It's real. There's nothing in the way yet, if that makes sense.
Wow. I'm wondering, what are other examples of intimacy? Because I'll actually give a little background to the question, because on a few of the previous episodes we talked about boundaries in that or this regard, and so my thought was in this regard regarding intimacy is, when is it, say, okay to be intimate? When is it okay to not be intimate? So where do you draw the boundary?
Well, that's interesting, actually, because first of all, what it's doing there is inviting kind of adult thinking, right? So we're thinking about actually when is it appropriate, when it's not appropriate. Okay, so if we remove slightly or kind of take the word intimacy and put it to one side, what we're really talking about is expressing our thoughts and feelings. That's at the heart of intimacy, is freely being able to express our thoughts and feelings. Now, does that mean you can say whatever you want? Can you just go blah? This is what I'm thinking, blah 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 blah, or this is how I feel. No, it doesn't. Because there does need to be, it needs to be filtered to a certain degree or encouraged through our adult, through our kind of sense of what's appropriate. Am I kind of trying to score something here?
Mm-hmm.
Do you know? Am I being okay? This is kind of the strongest kind of parameter you can put in. So am I going to say something that's intentionally going to offend somebody? And have I thought about that? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Because then I'm not showing intimacy, because I'm not considering the impact on them. So I can still express my feelings in a way that doesn't, it's not designed to hurt somebody,
Mm-hmm.
if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yes.
So it is being filtered through this kind of I'm okay, you're okay, adult awareness, self-awareness piece.
Mm.
But equally, I need to, am I hiding my feelings because I'm afraid of getting hurt? Because if I'm hiding my feelings because I'm afraid of getting hurt, well, then I'm maybe not being okay to myself, because my feelings are real and genuine. Right?
Wow.
So yeah, we do have to kind of weigh it up, and that comes through experience over time.
One thing I want to point out here is that now that we look at the outcomes, and for example, intimacy or the capacity for intimacy as one of the outcomes of TA, it's really, really useful to draw the line between the initial philosophy or the initial statement of TA, I'm okay, you're okay, and how it combines with the capacity for intimacy, or how it would combine with any other outcomes that we're gonna look into the other episodes. What's the other quote that you had there, Jason?
Yeah. So this is where this is Van Joins and Ian Stewart, and they slightly contradict Willems and Brown, because they say many may perceive intimacy as being the most risky way to relate to another person.
Okay.
Paradoxically, it is actually the least risky. So when I and the other person are in intimacy, we are communicating without discounting, without putting down, without having a hidden agenda. Right? Therefore, the outcome of intimacy must always be constructive for both people concerned. So they're saying it isn't risky, if you think about it, that actually you're not trying to hurt, you're not trying to get something out of somebody, they're not trying to get something out of you. You're just being really real in that moment, while also considering the other person and yourself, which you can balance. So they're saying, if it kind of isn't, it seems like a contradiction, but I think Willems and Brown are saying people who don't know this don't like to feel vulnerable, because they might be taken advantage of. Whereas Van Joins and Ian Stewart are saying, well, actually, you can feel vulnerable, because you can still be okay with yourself and okay with the other person. So even if it doesn't work out as you hoped, you weren't trying to deceive or distort or win something. There wasn't something going on. What do you think of that?
First of all, love the both quotes, and in a way they do contradict. I mean, but they don't at the same time. So it's kind of, many perceive it to be risky. Doesn't sound the same as it's risky. At the same time, they talk. I'm surprised that both of these quotes have risk in them, which is, again, the capacity for intimacy would sound something very open. What I like about it is we're coming back to this feeling of okayness, and or feeling of being okay. And it almost sounds like the capacity for intimacy shows or is able to manifest itself when a person feels okay. And the more you feel okay, the easier it is to manifest the capacity for intimacy with anyone, be it a very close person or be it someone that you don't interact on an everyday basis. And this kind of had, because for this episode, I was also looking into how can you actually bring capacity for intimacy into the workspace? Because again, capacity for intimacy and workspace don't necessarily go together in one question. They don't straight away fit. But if you don't look at capacity for intimacy at something, say, sexual, then there's a lot, and even today we talked about everything, and it didn't include the sexual element in it.
No, not at all.
And it's about emotional vulnerability. So how you can show sharing your thoughts, sharing your feelings, feeling okay with that, It's about trust with other people. So the way you would trust your peers, the way you would trust your manager, the way you would trust your organization that you work for. It's about empathy. So kind of being open to the fact that somebody is going through something. You might not know what it is, but it might be something very difficult for them or easy, and where you could show this support and empathy to them. And I think it's also about communication. So how you're able to express yourself honestly without any repercussions, or without, again, respectfully, yes,
Yeah.
but without being afraid of it coming back to haunt you at some point, right? So I think these four things came to mind, and it's kind of the emotional vulnerability, which is part of the capacity for intimacy, is emotional vulnerability, trust, empathy, and the ability to communicate. So that's what came to mind when we were talking about all of this.
And how powerful is that, right?
I mean,
You know, to have that in the workplace. You know, and I think actually workplaces have opened up to this more and more over the decades, right? I think at some stage there wasn't really an invitation towards being vulnerable, sharing your
Yeah.
feelings, sharing your thoughts. I think there was this kind of idea historically, you know, you need to separate personal from professional. And it turns out we can't do that, you know, because we're humans, you know, and we're humans first, and we're humans getting together to work on something, to do a task, problem solve, to whatever it might be. So as humans, we have thoughts and feelings and behaviors, right? And the ability to, as you were saying there, Ollie, kind of if we take the word intimacy and turn it to kind of the four things that you described, then it is definitely okay to be vulnerable. And what we're seeing again and again is those people who are able to show a bit of vulnerability, leaders, managers, um, in an okay way, then that
Right.
endears trust and loyalty and various other things. Do you know what I mean? It makes people work better because they it's like a psychologically safe space.
Yes. Yes. Again, coming back to Google, one of the most important things, and because I work in Google, and one of the foundational part of the dynamics of the team is psychological safety. So whether you want it or not, a team will be successful if there's psychological safety. If there's not, it could still be successful, but I guess it's the how long can it be successful without being psychologically safe
Yeah.
for real, you know? I have a question for you,
Yep.
Jason. You've been working with organizations like Google and different organizations for a while now. And if we take capacity for intimacy, and I'm sure you've already said that there have been changes over the last few years, maybe even tens of years. What do you think should be happening going from now on? How does capacity for intimacy change in organizations for the teams to be successful going from now on?
Yeah, it's a great question. I was just reflecting there in terms of psychological safety. I would argue you can't have psychological safety without the capacity for intimacy,
Oh.
if that makes sense. Now, what that means is you can't have psychological safety if there isn't the ability to be vulnerable, right? So to allow others to be vulnerable, but as a manager or leader to show some vulnerability at times, right? Because managers and leaders do have to kind of model behaviors, you know, so they do need to show that they're capable of it. And again,
Right.
what we're finding is through the research is, you know, once you start to do more of that in an okay way, you start to build relationships, right? So people feel closer in you know, in a team, and they trust the leader or manager more because they can see the person of the leader coming through, as well as the leader doing, you know, what they need to do in terms of their job, like strategy and productivity and all that kind of basis. So I think it was exciting to see this grow. And I'll be honest with you, the impact of COVID uh, brought to the surface the ability to be more vulnerable, the ability to share more capacity for intimacy, you know, so people were actively kind of checking in on each other, right, in work. And there was a wellness conversation, and that was music to my ears. It's like fantastic. Now it's kind of pulled back a bit. And we're not checking in so much. But I think the future is to keep these wellness conversations going And it's not, not to make the mistake that wellness is about talking about unwellness. Wellness is also talking about what's going well. You know what I mean? So that's where I think the future lies, is having the ability to have it psychologically safe to talk about things when people don't feel so well, but then intentionally talk about things that are going well in a person's life. So celebration stuff,
So it's always talking about the both sides of the coin, really.
That's right.
Not
That's
just
right.
the one side.
And that makes a whole picture.
Yeah. It reminds me whenever I would get feedback, I'd say 5, 6 years ago, I'd always look at the critique rather than what I'm actually doing well. So,
that doesn't feel good, eh?
No, it doesn't. No, it makes you feel, oh, what do I have to change straight away? Apart from, oh, this is actually what I'm great at. Let me celebrate that for a second.
Yeah. And then the bits that I need to work on, that's okay.
Yeah.
I'm glad I know that. So, and that's being vulnerable is not kind of putting ourselves in a not okay position by giving ourselves a hard time about it. Oh, I should have done this. I should have done that. I should have been perfect. No. I've got this information. I can work with it now. Thanks for the feedback.
Wow. That's, again, coming back to what transactional analysis is and how a capacity for intimacy is unpacked and how many things come into it. It's amazing. So what do you think, Jason? Have we do we have something else to unpack around capacity for intimacy?
I think we've done a pretty good job. I think when people watch this and whenever people hear the phrase capacity for intimacy, I think the word is a little bit confronting, intimacy. So that's why people go, what, hang on, what? And like you were saying, Ollie, it's used in a slightly different way in transaction analysis.
Yeah.
But really what we're talking about is the ability to recognize your thoughts and feelings as being okay and sharing them in an okay way and being open in the moment to others, sharing in an okay way without any hidden agendas and without, as these guys were talking about that I quoted, it's not all about kind of getting hurt, because even if we do feel hurt, if the other person didn't intentionally say that to hurt us, then actually we need to work on our side because they didn't set out to do that. They were just sharing what was going on for them, and we, in an okay way, should be open to that. And of course, that transfers not just from personal but to professional, right? If people are willing to share, that's a win in the first instance in my book, right? So what do you think? Have we done enough?
Oh, I think we went as we usually do. We went deep and very quick. I think when I thought about capacity for intimacy, the first thing that came to mind was sexual, and it doesn't necessarily have to be. That was my revelation about digging into capacity for intimacy, and what you talked about, why it's important, and what we talked about today is emotional vulnerability. It's about building that trust, openness, and communication. I loved the fact about there being no ulterior motive. You're just there in the moment and enjoying the company of the other person and the openness of the communication. And yeah, I liked the risk piece, even though it doesn't necessarily first come in as something that I would think about when I think about the capacity for intimacy, but it does make sense. You open yourself, that might be perceived as a risk. But in the end, it's all about us feeling okay every day.
Every day.
Well, folks, I hope you've enjoyed this episode. We've talked about capacity for intimacy today, and we'll be talking about some more outcomes of transaction analysis in the next episodes of this podcast. If you like this video, please press the like button, subscribe, and if you have any questions, use the comment section to post those questions, and we'll be answering them in our podcast or via the YouTube channel. Hope you enjoyed it, and hope you stay okay every day. See ya.